Hello, this is SoLaMee. How do we know what is true and what is not? When I look out at the world in recent years, with all the confusing interplay of information on the web, in the news, even in our own lives, I hear many people asking this question. How do we know? How do we know what is true and what is not? There is a deep, honest seeking for the truth out there. And it could be maybe one of the bigger challenges in our society. If you think back in history, back before there were internets, back before there was media, there were tribes, there were kingdoms, there were people talking and talking to other people, and they heard things and they heard news. But when people lied, it had a consequence because truth was valued and it mattered. And people still lied and people still spread lies. But when people recognized that it was not true, it had a deep, lasting effect on them because basically, as human beings, it was a valuable commodity to get reliable information. So there's outside sources of information, and then there's inner sources of information, our own inner barometer, our own inner sense of what's right for us. And intuition is right there with it too. People who have sensitivities and are aware and have an ability to hear guidance. Many people will say, bah, that just adds more to the equation. It does to some, but it also gives you often insights that you would have otherwise not had. And so, again, in the ancient times, Aborigines, they do this to this day, um, they listen and they can hear a deeper resonance of what is going on. They can look at people and see right into them. And that's just something we really need to get back to as a society, I think, and as a culture, as human beings. We need to remember how to be real, be honest, and be able to discern. So, back to the question, how do we know what is true and what is not? I like to say, follow the energy or the sensations. Become aware of what you are feeling when you're hearing information and what you're feeling when you meet people. So, energy awareness in the beginning is often experienced as a physical sensation of some type. It is a visceral awareness of a shift or a change in the human's body temperature, nervous system, balance, hearing, visual acuity, or the ability to suddenly see more clearly your surroundings. Our bodies are actually always hearing and feeling something. And the intellect, if we're all up in our heads, can kind of get in the way and get lost in logic, which isn't a bad thing in the right circumstances. But if you live with logic, you will miss very powerful moment to moment understandings of what's going on. Because logically, blah, 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 and it's based on the past. So it has self serving answers often. I try to follow the energy of the moment. I always begin with my own physical antenna or body awareness. I then move out from there to sense influences maybe in my energy field. And all of this does take time to learn, but all the different sensations are noticed in one direction or another when energy seems to be presenting a clue. Again, we're all feeling energy all the time from various stimulation, influences, people, places, and things. We're feeling something. So, many people today are familiar with the concept of a muscle test. Some of you have been to chiropractors, they started doing it many years ago. It is a interesting way to bypass that mind that gets too stuck in the intellect. So, what the muscle test does, it is basically a way to demonstrate how the body, the physical body, will weaken or strengthen when certain energies are brought close to the body. And I mean energies like you might be asked to hold a bottle of some remedy, a homeopathic, or you might be asked to say the name of somebody that you're wondering about, and then they do the muscle test on you, and that person is convinced that, what do you mean? I'm holding my arm out the same way I always do, but suddenly it's weaker because an idea or an actual object is introduced into that moment, and the body does a muscle test on it, and it weakens instantly if it drains your energy. When it strengthens it, you can say, okay, that one looks strong. But there's a lot of ways to read those things, right, the way, and so there is more to it than that. But just for general purposes. So for many years, I was aware of my body showing me a type of muscle test basically all the time. It was like an energetic response in my nervous system. I would suddenly feel good or, in contrast, drained as I came into proximity with something. I learned to make use of this sensitivity, even when shopping for an item. So this is how you practice these kinds of things. Start with simple things where there's not a big loss if you're wrong. You just learn from it. So I would basically even go into a bookstore, and I might be reading titles, but I might also be using my energetic antenna. And some books would literally kind of give me a little high, whoa, wave of energy. And I'd say, So I knew right then there was a validation, you could say, that I maybe needed to buy that book. You could say it was in harmony with my body. It was ultimately maybe going to serve my greater good. So I call this body awareness the ABCs of early energy sensitivity. Many years ago, I noticed, and you probably did too, that pets and young children had very clear energy awareness of their surroundings and of people. It seemed that this innate ability inside them could just look out at the world and get a real live moment snapshot of truth. My own son was very much like that. Before he could even speak, he was 2.5 to 3, and he was interacting with people. He was very social in his grins, but he tended to really feel people. And I wouldn't know it at first if I didn't ask the person, because he would reach up to them and just want to hug them, and he would lean to them and smile. Often he would look concerned about some people, and sometimes he was very afraid of some people. And it never matched if you just looked at logic. You needed to find out who those people were. And they always said, one of them, had lost their father and they were grieving. You wouldn't have known by looking at them, but my son knew. And so he could feel compassion towards these people's open, maybe wounded energy. And in contrast, he felt concern and maybe fear for some people some of which I didn't know at all, but let's just say they looked a little bit like maybe they weren't up to something good. But I noticed he was powerfully observing people. And he noticed pets, and he noticed the life around him. He noticed the sunlight, everything. Children do this naturally. And what's sad is that a lot of that ability that I believe is in us, it fades with life as we grow older. Sometimes parents can undermine our ability to have that the rest of our life. They either shut it off by saying, that was inappropriate. Don't speak out like that. Don't, because they're just honest. Children just say what's on their mind. And if you're shamed a little too much, you will stop being honest. So don't want to have that ability unlearned. But if it's already unlearned and we're back to basics, then let's start. Let's start today. So ask yourself if you were taught that what you felt was wrong. Parents don't know they're doing it, but when you feel something, the old saying, feelings are never right or wrong. They just are. But on some occasions, parents just won't accept them, and so you will be told your feelings are wrong. It's a sad